So I believe the question was, how are we planning to move forward given the deficit? You want to restate the question?
Sure.
Clear?
Why is Long Beach an outlier, and what will you do to change the ongoing budget deficit?
Right. So I know what it's like to represent a community that doesn't have the services that it needs to do, what it needs to serve its community. And what I will tell you is we have real challenges ahead in terms of our budget. We've filled our deficit with one-time funds this year. We are going through negotiations with our employee groups who, certainly we're having a hard time keeping employees, just like everyone else is, public and private sector. And so we have to think about, number one, how do we continue to deliver services at the end of the day? And how we grow our revenues. A few things. One, I'm going to focus on growing our revenues by, number one, creating a Mayoral Long Beach advisory team who focuses on, number one, getting our own house in order. When it comes to doing business in the city, it should be 3 words people hear: ease, speed, predictability. You can come here, it's easy to do work here, it's predictable, and we will help see the project through. The second thing that we have to do is make sure that we are growing in every part of town. We're growing economically. So in North Long Beach, we didn't contribute a whole lot to sales tax, property tax. By making investments in those communities to become more economically viable. It's important that that happens everywhere. When our downtown closed down during the pandemic, it wasn't that we only shut down services in downtown. We furloughed everywhere, every council district. And so we're interconnected. So we have to address economic inequality and make sure that we're growing revenue in all part of town. We talked about the tax code. That's got to be something really important that we look at moving forward, like how we incentivize the things we need to do in terms of from a budgeting standpoint. And the last thing I'll say is, as it relates to deliver services, we're going to have to innovate and think about how we do things differently. I think there are some services that are done by some that can be done by others. I think we have to think about how we collapse in departments and find some efficiencies, because the reality is we're going to be working with less revenue. We have a shortfall today, and with the lack of oil, we're talking about uplands and tidelands going away, we're going to have to tighten our belts. Thanks.
Okay, next question. What will you do to ensure that all Long Beach citizens feel well represented, no matter where they live, in all 9 council districts, or due to their ethnic background? And Councilmember Richardson goes first.
Sure. So, I mentioned this in the last debate. I think, we all know that Long Beach is very diverse city, and that's important. But diversity is really a challenge. It's about how we become a more inclusive city so everyone has a seat at the table and opportunity to thrive. Our story hasn't really been, we haven't done that. And it's not any individual's fault in this room, but we have a 17-year difference in life expectancy based on social determinants of health and opportunities. And poor air in one part of town that has a port, and more open space on another side of town. And so I believe that it's not one individual's job, but it's a job as a city, as an agency, to represent everyone. And it's the city, the agency's job, the institution's job, to make sure that we acknowledge those inequities when we take steps to close them. That's why I was proud to lead the charge in creating the Office of Equity in Long Beach, simply to help our city understand the impacts of decisions we make as well as budgeting, policies that we implement. A great example is during the pandemic, we placed something called an equity lens on every agenda item related to the pandemic response. That helped us understand, one, were we furthering the health inequities in our city or improving it with decisions we were making? And help talk about the impacts that COVID had on communities, how vaccinations were lacking in certain communities, and there was cultural context that was needed to be provided. And so we've done that work. Since then, we've grown capacity. The Office of Equity now takes on ADA. It now takes on language access. It's moving to the city manager's office. There's a deputy city manager focused on that. It's about resiliency. I will tell you right now that a city needs to invest in these things. It's not only smart, but it's economically and fiscally smart to do so as well. So you're not getting lawsuits and litigation like certain cities are impacted today. And so there's much more I can say about this issue, but as mayor, I'm going to institutionalize equity and make sure that as we make decisions, we do so in a way that looks out for every community. Thank you.
So we have an incredibly diverse city. And I know Councilman Richardson and I both know this because we're all around every part of this town. And I know he's been spending a lot of time in my neighborhood, and I know I've been spending a lot of time in his neighborhood. And I can tell you, regardless of where you live, you deserve to have a city government that's working for you. You deserve to have a voice at City Hall, regardless of your partisan affiliation, regardless of how much money you make, and regardless of where you live in the city of Long Beach. It's important that everyone feel like they have a voice and that their views, their concerns, their priorities are not minimized by anybody, not dismissed by anybody. They should have a voice at City Hall. And so what I'm going to do is on November 9th, an email is going to go out from me to all of the community associations in every council district. Some council districts have 5, and some, like mine, have 21 community and neighborhood associations. An email is going to go out with an invitation to set up a meeting. And they're going to be invited to come to a meeting with their council member, if the council person would like to join. And we're going to have a conversation about what do you need to thrive? What are the challenges and opportunities for your community, and how can we help you accomplish those? And we're going to set together an operational plan. I know it's not sexy political talk to talk about an operational plan, and there's no acronym associated with it. We're just going to get stuff done. We're going to set short, mid, and long-term goals for every single community, whether they want to have less graffiti in their neighborhood, or whether they want to have less crime, whether they want to have more affordable housing, whether they want to have more green space. We're going to go through every community, and we're going to come up with plans, and they're going to hold me accountable to doing everything I can to help their council member with all the resources and tools that I'm able to do in true partnership to help them accomplish those goals. It is really important for us to represent everyone. I came to Long Beach at the age of 18, and it was the first place where I felt I belonged as an immigrant.
We have a rebuttal request.
Sure. I wouldn't even call it a rebuttal. I think I just want to talk a little bit more about this issue. I've done a great deal of work here. I can think about, representing the district that I represent. We were discussing things like Measure A infrastructure, like first one. We had to make a tough choice. That choice was the Howard Park Community Center was our only, at one point our only place to meet, and every winter when it rained, we have to move outside because the roof would leak. And during the summer, the HVAC would go out. So we had to decide whether we were going to choose to fix the community center with our Measure A allocation, or improve the playgrounds in the area that has 90805 has more children that go to school than he does in Dakota City. And we had to make a hard choice, and we had to choose the community center, and we didn't get any Measure A playgrounds in my district. And it was a hard choice. I think equity is about acknowledging that it's not about everybody getting the same. It's about really understanding those conditions. My children should have had to go without a playground, and we have to really think about how we get every community with a playground. Thank you.
I absolutely agree with Councilman Richardson that having everyone get the same thing is not equity. Some people need more. They're starting off from a different place. And that concept was brought to light to our city years and years before we started as a council talking about equity. I mean, you look at the work of Dr. Norman, you look at the work of Dr. Hawley, they have laid the roots for this decades before Councilman Richardson and I ever stepped foot on the council, and I'm proud of their work. But what is important to note is that, yes, Councilman Richardson didn't get a playground in his district, but he got an over $10 million community center, an over $10 million library. Every district has to make choices. We didn't get a $10 million library in every district. We didn't get community centers in every district. We do our very best with the money that we have in the city to make sure that every resident gets the benefit of their tax dollars invested back into their community. And some communities get more, and I'm okay with that. But it doesn't mean that just because we don't get everything, we're not being treated fairly.
SB 9 and 10 was recently passed by the state. SB 9 allows 4 units to be built on virtually all single-family residential properties in the state with no public input. SB 10 permits cities to pass an ordinance to allow 4-story, 10-unit apartment complex on all single-family properties. Please state if you support or oppose these bills and why you've taken this position. And Councilwoman Price.
I opposed SB 9. I was the first council person to speak out against SB 9. And it's not because I don't think we need more affordable housing and that we need more housing. I believe we do need more housing. In fact, of the 26,000 additional homes that the city of Long Beach has to build in the coming years as pursuant to the state's requirement, 10% of those are going to be in my district. And anyone who knows my district knows that they do not welcome with open arms density and additional housing. And yet together we work to identify places where that additional housing makes sense, because every district has to do their share. We can't push it all onto one district or another. But SB 9 punishes the city of Long Beach. There are cities like Cerritos and Huntington Beach who are refusing to add any more housing. They're saying there's no vacancy here. And yet SB 9 treats us exactly the same as those cities. So I wrote a letter to Senator Gonzalez, who I believe is, has endorsed my opponent, and it was published in the Grunion. I sent it to Senator Gonzalez, Senator Umberg, and Patrick O'Donnell, our Assemblyman, and I said, can you rethink this? Can we have a threshold for cities like ours who are doing our best to comply with the state housing requirement? And can you allow us to still have local control? Because right now, under SB 9, it's a ministerial approval, meaning if the certain elements are met, the city has no discretion whatsoever to deny those permits. So open space and parking requirements, those things are not even considered because it's a ministerial approval. We have zero local control. We never want to be in a place where we don't have local control. No other council member stood up when I stood up to talk about this, and that was in June. In August, my council colleague, Councilman Austin, brought an item to oppose officially SB 9 and asked the governor to please not sign it. Councilman Richardson voted against that. It failed. The city council failed to tell the governor, please don't treat us the same as every other city. We need a mayor who's going to advocate for our local control.
Councilman Richardson?
Thank you so much. So we have a housing crisis. There were laws that were prohibited, things like ADUs in our community for years. And guess what? They didn't work. We had very prohibitive laws around legal garage conversions. And I can tell you just about every garage in North Long Beach was converted anyway. It was a law called the D-List law, based on 3 little girls who lost their lives by living in an illegally converted garage. And they didn't live there because they chose to. They lived there because that was their economic circumstance. And we had restrictive policies that didn't allow them to convert the garage legally and easily so they could live in a way that was safe and they could live. Growth is going to happen. It's about whether or not that growth is going to happen in a way that is safe and not haphazard. Where you have multiple families crowded in one household, half the residents in our city, right now are housing burden spending more than half of their income on rent. We can't on one side say that we care about the homelessness issue, but on the other side say that we don't support housing or vote against housing production and vote against tenant protections. You can't have it both ways. Either we're going to get serious about housing and economic prosperity of the people in our city, or we're not. And I can tell you, we need to do everything that we can. Now I will tell you, I believe in local control. I voiced my concerns on SB 9 and 10 as president of SCAC. It's on the record. Look at SCAC's position. I was president. And we voiced our concerns. We took action. We met with the governor's office. We met with the person who sponsored the bill, Senator Scott Wiener. It's all public. And we took on SB 10, it was imposed unless amended. And we fought and we got some amendments in there to preserve some local control, but particularly in cities like Long Beach. And so it's more than grandstanding. And I remember that vote. That vote was actually to ask the governor to veto it after it had been adopted by both houses. And the people that my opponent say that she talked to and wrote a letter to, they voted for it. Umberg voted for it. And so they've already voted for it. It was passed in both houses. It was going to pass. So yes, I voted no on asking the governor to veto it. I will do it again today because it was a ceremonial vote.
We have a rebuttal.
It was not to ask the governor. Let's do a fact check here. It wasn't to ask the governor to veto it. It was to ask the governor to not sign the bill. Good thing it's all recorded.
That's a veto.
So Councilman Richardson talks about his work on SCAG and how he made some comments in opposition to SB 9 on SCAG. I'm not aware of that. That was never mentioned at any city council meeting, ever. And I'm not aware of him meeting with the governor on behalf of the city of Long Beach. That's certainly not something that the council was aware of or voted to approve. But I can tell you, he served on the state legislative committee of the city council where we talk about state legislation, which would have been the perfect place to express any opposition to SB 9 and how it's going to affect your own city. And nothing came out of SB at the State Ledge Committee to oppose SB 9. So the fact that he may have done something that no one is aware of on another committee, but not in his own city, is interesting to say the least.
Use this chick, but this is a crowd that does check facts. And I want you to go read, go listen to the remarks at the State Legislative Committee. When number one, I informed them of my work at SCAG and the positions that we took. I expressed my concerns on local control. All of those comments are on the record publicly in Long Beach on a committee. So it's available. I encourage you to take a look at it. Again, this is not about grandstanding about who was on the wrong side and who's on the right side. You need a mayor who's going to be straight with you and deliver results. I have a proven track record of results. I've been trying to work on housing and homelessness for quite a long time. This is not new for me. And as mayor, I have the relationships with our city council, our college board of education leaders to make sure that we have the partnerships in place to make a meaningful difference in people's lives and actually build housing that's affordable for people. Thank you.
Oh yes, he definitely has those relationships. He spent a whole career building those relationships. Those are really important relationships. So important that he wouldn't vote against an item that was hurtful for the city to preserve those relationships. This is not an issue about housing or the need for housing in the city of Long Beach. We all agree that we need housing in the city of Long Beach. We all have compassion for those who need affordable housing in the city of Long Beach. SB 9 was about local control. SB 9 was about the city being able to weigh in and get input from communities regarding where that density was going to go. SB 9 was about protecting the beautiful neighborhoods that everyone here has pride in and making sure that where we have additional density, it makes sense for our communities in terms of the impacts to those neighborhoods. SB 9 was not about not wanting more housing. It was about local control.
Next question. In 2016, Measure A promised improved public safety, infrastructure, reopening of the community hospital, and a rainy day fund. In 6 years, Long Beach citizens are disappointed with the lack of progress in these areas. What would you do to provide these promised resources for Measure A? And Councilmember Richardson goes first.
Sure. We have delivered on a number of things that were outlined in Measure A. Some things that I wish were in Measure A were not, and we had to go back and add those things. For example, paramedic rescue 12, we told the story earlier, wasn't included in the original plan restored. We had to go back and advocate and include that. But to put it in perspective, about 200 sworn positions were cut during the course of the pandemic, our past recession in Long Beach. And Measure A began doing that fundamental work of restoring. We restored the training division. We didn't conduct some of our own training in Long Beach. So we restored the PD training division. We restored the South Division of Florida Long Beach Police Department. We restored Engine 8. Serving the Belmont Shore area, we restored Rescue 12. These make significant, meaningful differences. There's more that needs to happen. Measure A, the first tranche, has moved forward. Now we have a second tranche of funds, and we just proposed a new infrastructure plan, largely based on Measure A for the next 5 years. And so we have to make sure that we hold folks accountable and continue to deliver infrastructure and continue to invest in public safety through Measure A. But I will tell you, our costs are growing and our revenue sources like oil, that's declining. We're not going to be able to count on that. There needs to be a big conversation about how we restructure, how we gather revenue, and how we boost revenue in other parts of town to make sure that we are growing our pie, if you will. Because the expectations of yesterday, this isn't Grandma's Long Beach anymore. There are services and things that are realigned from the state to local government that cost more money. And we're going to have to do more and innovate and change our city so we can deliver more services. And so I think Measure A has been significantly helpful in closing the gap. If we didn't have Measure A, we would be on a world curve right now. But we need to be honest about expectations that there are a lot of things that we need to do internally as a city to make sure we have a model city that can continue to deliver results and make it look differently than we have today. Thank you.
Well, if you're a grandma, this is still your Long Beach, so you can embrace it. Measure A, a lot of people don't know this, but Measure A actually has an oversight committee. And everything that we slate for Measure A funding has to go through this committee. And it's a citizen oversight committee, and they have to make sure that every dollar that we spend on Measure A fits within what we committed as a resolution of the City Council the money would go to. The primary focus of Measure A over the last few years, well, since its passage, has been on public safety and infrastructure. I know there are still a lot of streets and alleys and sidewalks that people want fixed, but when I first joined the City Council in 2014, I had the privilege to let one community association out of 21 know that they were getting a street paved. That has changed tremendously as a result of Measure A. We are able to pave thousands of square miles of streets as a result of Measure A. And it has really helped us improve our infrastructure, although it's not where it needs to be, and we are working on that. But I will say we've also added police officers every year. Now, last year, or during COVID, we did not. Every department had to suffer cuts, including the police department. But every other year, we used Measure A funds to add more police officers. It's just that we never saw a net gain. Because as we were onboarding new officers, we were having officers retire. And we just never saw a net gain, which is why things like retention bonuses really work, because the public never really saw that net gain. But I can tell you, community hospital is a whole other story because it didn't work out because of the risk the city took with the partner. But the $22 million that we were going to use from Measure A to go into community hospital is now available for us to use for infrastructure and public safety. So that's a good thing. We didn't, of course, have that come to fruition, but every other thing that we committed to residents we would use Measure A funding for, we have.
Economic development and business associations are vital to a thriving city. What will you do to promote business opportunities in Long Beach that will build our economy and provide jobs for our area? And we're going to start with Councilwoman Price.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, Mark and I own a business. We started it 3 years ago. We went through COVID. We did everything we could to survive. We got PPP loan. We went through our savings. We did everything we could to try to keep our business alive. And I'm proud to say we had 15 employees. We went down to 2. Now we're about 11. And I can tell you that the city, again, I've mentioned it before, we don't spend any money in business recruitment and retention. Think about the breakfast bar.